Okay, everybody, thanks again for joining us for the power of our story. It's a very powerful, could be the most powerful hour of your week. I know it's one of the most powerful hours of mine. And today I'm going to go over a little bit about who I am, and then we're going to go over the topic today, which I feel appropriate today for some reason on my soul is the fire within. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What is our motivation behind doing it? So we're going to talk a little bit about the fire within. Before we get going, Rich, if you want to give me a quick 60-second who you are for people that might be watching this online, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm Rich Oakley. I've spent 30 years in law enforcement at the city, county, and federal level. My career started in 1967. I was 24 years old. Um, I dealt with a lot of stuff. I was kidnapped as a rookie cop 6 months out of the academy. Four guys, they were going to kill me, but they eventually let me go. And then I had an assassination attempt on my life in Newark, New Jersey, when I was with DEA, and I had nothing to, no one to talk to, uh, and I carried that stuff. And Sarah was really surprised. She said, "Man," she says, "you carried all that trauma, suffering in silence for 3 decades." And it wasn't until 1991 that I actually got some help from DEA when they had clinicians. But I when I met Sarah on LinkedIn and I had an opportunity to tell my story, that was the first time I told my story. And,
Mm.
and so, yeah. So, and now I'm trying to do whatever I can to help others, first responders and veterans, so that they don't have to go through what I went through because, uh, uh, after you come out of this thing, and me and my wife divorced, and I told her I didn't know who I was. I had no idea who I was at the time. Yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that and being here and being part of this. And I just want to say that your story does matter. And we have all learned one way or the other that being able to tell it and get it out can actually bring some healing, but not just to ourselves. Sometimes it can bring healing to people that have experienced the same thing and also felt alone. So thank you for that and being here. Sabine, would you like to give us a quick introduction of who you are and how you ended up here?
Yes, of course. Yes, my name is Sabine. I'm from Germany and I'm a descendant of a participant of World War II. It was my grandfather. And there's a big, big, big untold story inside our family that affects my whole life, lifelong struggling with that. But I couldn't never name it. I felt that is something deep and something tremendous, but I couldn't face it. I couldn't name it. It is just inside me tremendous grief. Never told about that. Even my father never told about that with me. And it affected my whole life. And later on in my life, in my 40s, 30s, sorry, I made some workshops with Israeli therapists in the university, and that there comes out a lot of things about trauma and things like that. And I could face it a little bit more, but I wasn't still unaware of what happened with my grandfather. This is, I found out very much time later on, and now I have a name for it. When I had the first event with Sarah and Ryan, he told about moral injury, and that is something that resonates very, very deeply with me. And now the story makes sense for me. My grandfather, experienced exactly that, I suppose, and it's a tremendous grief with that. And this was my lifelong struggle, and this is why I'm very interested in what work you do. I appreciate it very, very much, and I think it is so important to integrate these wounds because otherwise it will settle through the generations. This is my experience I have in short terms, very short terms.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that share. I've taken a couple courses and have training in what's called transgenerational trauma. And it sounds like a lot of that was going on from grandfather passed on. And we don't understand some of the stories we tell or the things that we think or say until we can dig deeper ancestrally to figure out what's going on. So I'm glad that you started that and that you're here. And then, for those that might be watching this online, I'm sure everybody knows who Sarah is, but if you got this link randomly, Sarah Carell started the Power of Our Story, which is where we can get military, police, first responders together and to tell our stories to bring healing. So I don't know if you're okay, Sarah, you can just give me an okay, or is there something you'd like to say? Just a little bit about that. All right. So I'm glad you guys are all here and know that you can join us live. If you go to the Power of Our Stories website, you can join us live multiple times a month for this. And back to what I was saying to Rich, telling our story can be healing sometimes. And I know for me it has been, but I know when I first started telling my story, it actually caused a lot more grief and pain and suffering than it did healing. And I didn't learn until later through another course that I had taken and got certified in that the manner in which we tell our story, can be re-traumatic, re-traumatizing, sometimes more traumatic than the actual experience. And I know for me, a lot of my stories, I would become more emoted and emotional as I told them, not realizing that over the years of telling them, I was releasing those same PTSD, trauma, hormones, and endorphins at the same time. And every time I just kept amping my own nervous system up. So I'm so grateful that I found a home here with Sarah and the Power of Our Story to bring healing to others and myself through story. So with that, who am I? Who is Richard? Why is Richard here? So I know I've told variations of my story, and if you go back to the very first time I showed up, my entire story is on there. But the long story short is I'm a Navy SEAL of 15 years and a firefighter of 25. And that's 40 years of trauma to be built up in the nervous system. And I didn't even realize how funny it was when I told people that as a Navy SEAL of 15 years, 5 deployments, multiple injuries, that I had to find something safer to do. So I became a firefighter, that everyone laughs. And Sarah, every time I say that, Sarah smiles and laughs. And I honestly, the first time I said that from stage, I didn't understand why it was so funny. Then the more I thought about it, I'm like, okay, who in their right mind, when a building's fully involved in flames, is going to decide to go run into it? Or one call I specifically remember was a gentleman that was in the rain on the 15 freeway in San Diego. And if you know anything about San Diego, when it rains, nobody knows how to drive because the oils turn into basically an oil slick. And there's an area where the freeway goes up and the exit ramp comes off, and it was raining. He lost control and he hit that area. I guess they'd call it the gore point, but where it lets off, and the car rolled upside down and spun. And I found myself at 2 o'clock in the morning in the rain, upside down in a car with blood and oil everywhere, having to lift this guy up so my partner could cut the seatbelt to lower the gentleman and pull it out. How crazy of a nervous system must I have had to think that that was safer, right? Because it's pretty not, But so for me, it started back in Ohio when I was a teenager. And yes, I was, like I said, I was a SEAL for 15 years, firefighter 25. But how does that determine the fire within, which is what I kind of think the slogan for today I want to be is long before that, when I was 12 years old, I was sitting on the couch waiting to go roller skating. Yes, roller skates, with a local church group. But my dad needed to take me when he got home from work. And he didn't show up, and he didn't show up, and he didn't show up. Then I find myself getting angry. Now I'm going to miss the church group. My mom came in hysterical, crying, totally unable to formulate a thought, a sentence, and rightfully so, because that's how I found out my father had been killed. My father had been taken from me at the age of 12 by a drunk driver. And here I was sitting on the couch, angry that he wasn't coming home so I could go roller skating. So subconsciously, I see now where that set me down kind of a shame spiral of myself. And then also losing your dad at 12, he was my hero. What I didn't realize and what it did, and I realized this later, is it sent me on over a 30-year journey of trying to make a dead man proud. And I will tell you what, there is no greater motivation and no greater fire within than trying to make a dead man proud. Why? Anyone want to guess why? I want to guess. Go ahead, Sarah.
It's never achievable.
Exactly. Because you can't do it. Not only is it not achievable, it's not measurable. So what do? You keep going and you keep going and you keep going. So it wasn't just one form of martial arts. It ended up being three. Second degree black belt in Kempo, first degree black belt in Shotokan, a combat jiu-jitsu instructor, hand-to-hand combat instructor in the military. It wasn't just the military, right? I had to do something what I thought was special, which was I had to become a medic. Why? Because my entire family growing up were the volunteer department, my hometown, Chippewa Lake, Ohio. All the women, aunts, grandmas, uncles, sister, were all EMTs and firefighters. And all the men, the uncles and cousins and my dad and my stepdad eventually were all volunteer firefighters. And I grew up in the fire station. I didn't know you could get paid to do it, right? But I got to witness my mom fight fire for 50 cents an hour in the 80s. I mean, I had some examples, and yet losing my dad was the only thing that reminded me of what life wasn't, if that makes sense, because I gave up hope and I lived in despair. And like I said, I didn't realize it was the motivation for everything I achieved. So joined the military, had to be a medic because I grew up in that environment, right? This is what will make dad proud, right? My dad was an EMT, but didn't know he was. He had passed his test with 100%, never saw the results before he was killed, and they buried him with his certificate. So how can I make dad proud? Not even knowing that's what I was doing, not even knowing the hyperachieving was doing that until later on. So then I couldn't just be in the military. I had to be the best of the best. So I was a medic with the Marines for a little bit. And I'm like, no, they're not the toughest guys. Sorry, any of the Marines listening. But to me, when I was a kid, that's how it felt. Who are the toughest guys? Oh, the SEALs. But in order to be a medic with them, you had to become one of them. So I endured one of the toughest trainings on the planet, not to be a SEAL, but to be a medic with the SEAL platoon to provide them the care they need to come home. Sounds ludicrous when you look at it that way, that my motivating force wasn't even to be a SEAL, but it was to be something else within the community. You know, it is literally, when you count all the extra training, 9 months of the most unspeakable cruel training that a human being can think of to put another human being through. But it's designed to create a bond and a commonality and a community that you can stand shoulder to shoulder and face any adversity and persevere. That's the whole intent. And mine was even because I wanted to do that job. It's because I wanted to do a different job within that job. And then once I graduated, I realized all the door kicking, right, Rich? Door kicking is fun. But once I graduated, I realized all the door kicking was fun. So for me, and I'm going to ask this question now because we're no longer in it. And for a lot of the retired people that might be here and watch this, when the uniform comes off, whether the military, police, fire, or something parallel, or even the parental uniform that we wear sometimes, right? The external mission ends, but the internal one begins. And it dives into identity, purpose, passion, transition. It's about finding new meaning beyond that position. But what puts us in that position to begin with? What's the fire that decides that you're going to join the military? Nobody wakes up in the morning. For anyone that sees this, there are a few people, but most people that enter the police, the military, and fire services are trauma related decisions. They experienced something in their life so horrific that they chose those professions to make sure it would never happen to anyone they knew or loved about again. Rarely does somebody wake up and decide, I want to go run into a burning building. Rarely does anybody wake up and decide, I want to go do CPR on 30 infants and 30 adults over the next 10 years of my life. Nobody wakes up and says, Rich, I love you. I want to be one of the first Black police officers in my community. And I want to volunteer to get shot at and cussed at, right? No one volunteers to wake up one day and say, I want to go put the uniform on and I want to deploy for 6 months out of my life, time and time again, over a 20-year career, and miss birthdays and Christmases and holidays. And oh, yeah, possibly die just because it sounded like a good thing to do that day. There's usually an overriding thing that became that fire or passion within. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. As I said, mine was losing my father and then going on this unconscious, not even subconscious, unconscious is the most powerful force we have because it has motivation to carry on. It doesn't need motivation to carry you. Your subconscious and your conscious need motivation to get through. Your unconsciousness will always find its own motivation. Damn the damage it does to the body to get you there. So if there's anyone here in the roles that we have done and played, I'm curious if we could discuss a little bit of not about when the mission ended, we'll get there, but what was it that caused you? What was the motivation for you, Rich, to decide what you decided to do? For you, Sabine, to decide what you did to do? Sarah, the group of people that you've brought together in the power of our story. Where did that come from? And what's the motivation that keeps you going daily? So I'd like to open it up for conversation and, you can raise your digital hand and I'll, as we go, or just unmute yourself if that's easier. But I'd really just like to have a dialogue around this.
I'll hop in. I was gonna see if somebody else wanted to pipe in, but I'll go ahead and start. Yeah, definitely the catalyst for me was the death of my dad, who died by suicide. And I think just I think what was horrifying to me is what must a person go through to get to that point where they would take their life. That was the nightmare for me. That was just at the time, it was just indescribable of, just the complicated grief. Like it was just so shocking, so shocking. And and it took me a long time. I mean, I told my close friends, and then I did what I needed to do to heal and to try to kind of put pieces together. But it definitely grew into a passion like, I don't want people to, go through this. Like how can I help somebody lessen the confusion and uh, the isolation and what they call a disenfranchised grief? That's the kind of grief that is not really socially acceptable. So, suffering because somebody you love died by suicide is not really socially acceptable. So you have to be careful who you tell, because if you're very raw, you don't want to feel worse after you share the story, right? So I think for me, what really opened up this world for me, this of veterans and first responders that I feel actually so at home with, is that a veteran shared his story with me. And that was like, oh my gosh, we really should be in there with the people who protect us at the back end. And so, doors opened and they closed during this journey of kind of discovering where I could put this fire, like where can I put this fire? And just a very natural fit was with our protectors. And so I just kept going through those open doors. So that was the catalyst for me. That was where my fire started, to be able to serve this arena.
Wow, that's a lot. And I just want to touch on something you said. It almost feels lonely if you're grieving the loss of somebody that took their own life because you can't grieve out loud without fear of judgment by some people. I like to think that that is so yesterday as far as the mindset goes, but unfortunately, I think that that stigma is kind of still there. And it's because people don't understand suicide and the pain that comes with it. So I'm with you, and I just want to hold you in that moment that, and I think you said, and I quote, the despair and the amount of pain that somebody must be going through to get there. And it's so true. And also, the level of grief that you had from that is more intense and deeper than losing somebody to a different means. So I just persevere that strength and your ability to stand up and move, because purpose doesn't I'm sorry, it doesn't retire, and it doesn't really inspire, it transforms us. When you have that purpose like you did, it's very transformational, isn't it? Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And you, Sabine, Rich.
Okay, I can share a little bit. For me, it was to discover what happens with my grandfather because no one told about what happens to him. As I said, I felt always grief inside me, and I could not discover what it could mean. And my father didn't tell me. And we learned nothing about that in school. Let me explain. When I was 16, we saw the first films about Auschwitz camps and all the things about the Holocaust stuff. And that was very, very deeply hurting me. But I had a bit distance to it. It was horrible and I couldn't imagine, but I always had a distance to it. Um, I asked my father what is with my grandfather? What was he involved into that? My father denied. No, he was not involved into that crimes. Um, he was in Russia, of course, but there were no fightings, he always said. No fightings in Russia. So I could not make sense of that. What does that mean? No fightings in Russia? That couldn't be true. But he said, no, that was all right. He was not involved in battles. And so I think my grandfather did not experience bad things. Um, and I was fine with that because I said there must be good family legacy. I could be happy. And later on, it was in the 90s or 2000s, I heard the first time about Leningrad. Um, I'm not sure if everybody knows what happens in Leningrad. Do you know what happens there? Is it common knowledge for you? I think Stalingrad is known. Stalingrad was a battle, big battle, where the whole army gets lost. German army gets lost in the fighting in Stalingrad. But Leningrad wasn't, nobody knows about that. And this is first time when I come to know with that when I made a family constellation. A family constellation that happened by accident, more or less. I was part of a group, and that when the facilitator comes to my place, he breaks down, and I think, well, what's the problem? What's could not make sense of that. And he said, it's because of your grandfather. And I could not make sense of that. I said, my grandfather was in Russia, but there were no battles. And he could not make sense of that. And he said, no, that couldn't be true. Um, and later on, I read a little bit more about Leningrad. And if you didn't know, it was a siege where the German army surrounded the city and prevents the Russians to carry food to the inhabitants. And that was part of a bigger plan of Hitler to starve the inhabitants from Leningrad to death without a battle. And the siege lasts for 3 years, nearly 3 years. And my grandfather was part of that. He was in a pioneer battalion. And of course, they had some fightings, but not very much because their only purpose was to provide that the Russian can transport food to the city. And the result of that was that more than 1.5 million inhabitants of Leningrad died. And this is very hard for me. Could not make sense for that. And I suppose my grandfather suffered from that because he has to be there and to watch that, to feel it, to see it, to smell it, and could nothing to do against it, I suppose. And that was the hardest stuff I ever heard. I'm sorry for that. And this is what
Not
makes
at all.
me so deeply sad. And my father was also sad. And was never spoke, he never could talk about that. My grandfather didn't talk about that, and he died shortly after the war was over. And the reason is why I'm sad. I feel that he suffered from that. And I think this is sadness because of all these people that must die. So, and I think this is a different kind of sadness. I had been in Auschwitz, of course, also with the groups and to other memorials of war, and of course that is sad and moving. But this sadness I feel when I talk about Leningrad is different. So and this is why I think it has to do with a trauma or inherited moral injury wound that settles through the generations. And I would not talk about that with other friends, for example, here in Germany, because they always say, Sabine, that's old stuff, forget about that, your grandfather is dead, and it had nothing to do with you, it's not your fault, and things like that. And you can't tell no one here. I had talked with a friend last week, and he says, Sabine, that's a projection. You had some other sadness inside you and you start crying because of other reasons, but that is old stuff. Uh, and this is what I would deny. It is not old stuff for me, and it's still present inside me. So this is my motivation to take part also in such meetings, for example, because I want to learn what to do with that and how can I process that and how can I work through. And I think a big relief is it to talk about that. And I feel that there is a container here in Sarah's story. Um, and this is a big relief for me that I can talk about that without being judged and without being dismissed or withdrawn, like it is here in my country when I try to talk about that. This is
Yeah.
very short words, my problem. Okay.
Wow. Yeah. And my goodness, I do just want to sit with you for a minute in this. That was a lot. And it's not so much that you just shared a lot, is what I want to say. It's that you've been carrying
Yeah,
a lot
thank you. Thanks a
and you've
lot
been
for your,
carrying that.
yeah. Yes, I suppose I do. I could not make sense about that, that this grief and this sadness is real when I talk about that. I can't stop.
It makes sense. It makes sense. And it's okay.
Okay.
And it's normal to feel the way you would be feeling right now. And I just want you to hear that. It makes sense and it's okay. In addition to the transgenerational trauma that I mentioned, there's a thing called transgenerational shame as well. And we can carry the shame of others in our life and not even know it. And it can bring a heaviness to our shoulders, a heaviness to our spirit, a despair to our soul, you know. And the fact that your grandfather died so shortly after the war is completely understandable as well. It's almost felt like he died alone and ashamed. And because of that, he's needing peace. And transgenerationally, it is real. And your nervous system, right, is passed down and down and down, that it makes sense that you're carrying that now. So your heaviness and your sorrow right now are so alive and real. And I see them and they're alive and real. So I want you to do me a favor. Can you just sit back in your chair and get your feet flat on the ground? Sit back in your chair and get your feet flat. I want your feet completely flat on the ground. I want you to put your hands on your heart.
Okay.
Put them on your
Thank
heart.
you.
Put them there.
Yeah.
Close your eyes. Close your eyes. And just breathe really deep with me. Let it out. Let's just do 3 of those. Breathe deep. Keep your eyes closed. I want you to stay in your body. Breathe out. One more. And breathe out. Now I want you to breathe in for 10 seconds. Breathe in for 10 seconds. And then hold it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out. Now breathe in for 10 seconds and hold it for 5 again. Your pain is real. Your heaviness is real and your sadness is real. And thank you for sharing with us. Exhale. And then when you're ready, open your eyes. How do you feel?
Yeah, it's a relief.
Yeah.
It is very important to tell that story. And I feel this is a circle where I can share it. and where I'm not judged or diminished or withdrawn. And also in Germany, it's really tricky because some people say, okay, it's you want to minimize the accountability of the Germans and try to flip the script, and the Germans are the victims. And but this is not my intention. I just feel it so deep inside me that I just only can cry. And this is, I think that's a truth. And you see, we Germans always have to justify ourselves, of course, and that's difficult. That's difficult story. And but thank you so much, Richard. It's a little bit better now. I think it's a little bit better. Yeah,
I believe, I believe that your intent is nothing more than healing.
yeah, that's fun.
And you have a great opportunity to work with somebody to do breath healing and to just do that Shen's drainage healing to just break the cycle. Do you
Yeah,
need to tell the
I suppose
story
that
to bring healing?
is, yeah,
You
I
suppose what?
appreciate that very much. Thanks. Pardon? Okay.
You were going to say something. I suppose what?
Sorry. I did not get all what you say. Could you repeat it? Because
Yeah.
my English is not always the best. Yeah.
You were starting to say
Could you
something.
repeat?
You were starting to say something. You said, I suppose, and then
Ah,
you
I
stopped
understand.
talking.
Right. Yes, for me, it's the most important thing that I understand what's inside me, what kind of grief, what kind of sadness is inside me, and that I get the right explanation for it. And this is my purest motivation to do that and nothing else. I just wanted to understand and to process that wound. This is my deepest motivation with it. And I'm very happy that I found this kind of container to share it and to be acknowledged. It is very, very big thing for me. So this is what I wanted to say. I hope
Well,
that
thank you
makes
so
sense.
much.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Well, that was a lot, folks, and I'm just really glad that you felt comfortable enough to share and let us hold you in this space. So thank you for that. How about yourself, Rich? Anything coming up for you that you want to share? I know that seems like a tough act to follow, but we're not following anything, right? Love is patient, love is kind. It doesn't keep score. So, how about you? What's been your motivation?
I wanted to tell Saban that this is a very, very safe platform. When I first came on, I think Sarah said, you don't have to tell your story. You could just come on and listen. And once I probably listened for about a month, and then I realized that it was safe. And so I just unloaded, you know. Um, I lost my dad when I was 13. He was World War II, Navy. In fact, I was born while he was at sea. And when he came home, he he had some nightmares and stuff, from the war, and he started drinking with some friends of his, and they were drinking cheap stuff, really cheap stuff. And so one day, we're in school, and we get called. I had a brother and a sister. We get called into the principal's office and said somebody's going to come and pick you up. Uh, and I said, why? I said, well, they'll tell you when they pick you up. So my dad was in the hospital. He was dying, so that they wanted us to come to the hospital to say goodbye. Well, when we got home, the phone rang, and my mom said that Dad just passed, so we couldn't go to the hospital to see him. So I never did get to say goodbye to him. Uh, him and my mom, the marriage was kind of on the rocks. So he just drank a lot. He drank. He drank himself to death because of pain and all the stuff that was going on. When I found out he passed away, I told my mom. I said, "Look." She came out. I was on the back porch crying. She came out, put her arms around me, said it's going to be okay. I said, Mom, you don't ever have to worry about me drinking. I would live to break that promise. And in a big way. I mean, I had an intimate relationship with Johnny Walker Red and Jack Daniels, and I had a friend who owned a liquor store. If I knew I was going to be uh, working past 10 o'clock at night, I'd call him, and he would take a fifth Johnny Walker or Jack Daniels, put it in the bag and stick it on the side of his store by the garbage can. And I'd just go pick it up, go home, and guzzle it down. And there was one night in fact, my daughter saw me do this. This was later while I was with DEA. I got in the car one night and they saw me with my pistol. And I told them I was just going for a ride, and I was going to do something. And I thought about my mother and I said, you know what? I, I can't do that. I can't do that. So I came back home and they were glad to see that. Now, my grandfather became my father figure. I went on the police department 67. He died at 68. And that was really, that really hit me because I mean, he had a lot of wisdom and I loved him. I still love him. So um, my mom remarried and she moved on uh, with my stepfather, who I didn't really get along with. So I stayed with my grandfather. And in the house, in fact, I did a story one night for Sarah and a group about my upbringing. Uh, there wasn't a lot of love. You didn't hear the word "I love you" a lot. There wasn't a lot of hugging and all that other stuff going on. And one thing you said, Richard, that jumped out at me is I read something and I'm trying to rack my brain as to where I read it. But what it said was that a lot of the people who have ACEs go into the first responder or military type stuff. And I don't remember why that is, but it really jumped out at me. I said, "Wow," you know. Uh, so I had a cousin who was 5 years my junior. He was he could draw. I mean, I told the kid, I said, you could write your own ticket when you grow up. He got hooked on heroin, and so that hit me, and that was the catalyst for me to go into law enforcement. And once I got in there, I I worked patrol for about a year and a half, and I got promoted to a detective. I was working narcotics and homicide at the same time, and the first time I'm 24 years old. My first uh, death scene was suicide by train. Guy jumped out in front of a train, and I got the call 3 o'clock in the morning. Go there, wait for the medical examiner, and we were walking along the railroad, picking up body parts, arms, legs, brain pieces, brain matter and stuff. And I got off about 8 o'clock that morning, and I went home and poured an ice, iced tea glass full of Johnny Walker and downed it. You know, and and there wasn't anything around. I mean, the police department, you would hear people say, "You don't want to talk about this stuff because they're going to put you in the rubber gun squad," right? Okay, so I don't want to go in the rubber gun squad.
Right,
Uh,
right.
DEA, the same DEA, the assassination attempt. The very next day, when I walked in the office, they put me in another undercover operation, and they said because they were afraid I might freeze up or chill, but
Hmm.
they threw me
Hmm.
right back in there. It wasn't even 24 hours, and I was right back in the fire again. Yeah.
Dude, that is heavy, and it's funny. I got chills as you told that story for so many reasons, so many reasons. And one of them was you were talking about that death by train. When I was early on in my firefighting career, and I didn't even know this was out there, but I found a video online of my former partner talking about this call, and it really humbled me because she talked about it in the manner in which how strong I showed up in the call
Mhm.
and gave support to the crew and the people in the area. But we had the same thing. We had a gentleman that was walking down the trolley tracks and ran and dove in front of the trolley to end his life. And exactly what you're saying, the accident scene was about 100, 200 feet long. And I'll
Mhm.
just leave it at that. And when we got there, she's like, Richard just knew how to calm us down, how to do what needed to be done, and how to get things done. And so as you're telling that story, I was remembering that call. And as calm as I was at the time, I remember looking back now how dysregulated I was afterwards, you know? So, we can be what we need to be in the moment. I want you to hear this again. We can be who we need to be in the moment, but who are we when the moment's gone?
Mhm.
And you
Yeah.
just said something there. You just said something there, Richard, that really struck me, which was you read something about how everyone that goes into the military or the law enforcement, those things, they have the aces, right?
Mhm.
And you don't know why. And I was actually interviewed last week. A gentleman scheduled an appointment with me, and it just turned out to be kind of a connect call. And then he was kind of interviewing me about how I became who I am and why I do what I do. And he asked me the question. He goes, "So, is what I hear you say, Richard, is that anyone that goes into like the police, the military, the law enforcement arena, that they're running away from something?"
Mhm.
And I thought about that a lot when he said it. And then what hit me, I said, absolutely. I said, but there's an addition to that. There's a but. He goes, what's that? I said, people that typically join those three professions are running away from something or running towards something.
Mhm.
And what I found in our life is quite often we're running away from something or running towards something. So for you, you know, who knows what it could have been? Maybe you were running away from the drinking. Maybe you're running away from losing your father. Maybe you're running towards the brotherhood, the community that the police department may have given you.
Yeah.
But in order to step into what they call a global high intensity position, you tend to have a global high intensity nervous system and a global high intensity desire. So when he asked me that question, I told him that, yeah, they're either running away from something, running towards something. I found myself speaking to myself. What was I running away from? What was I running towards?
Wow. Yeah.
And your father, same thing. Um, I'm assuming he didn't talk about a lot of what happened in the war. So similar to, Sabine's story, um, we don't know what he sat with at night every night. Was it grief? Was it sorrow? Was it shame? Because I know, and I don't know if this pertains to you or not, Rich, but reflecting back over my military career, at the time, I was proud of everything. And then even many years after, I was proud of everything. But then as you get older, there's that old saying, "My give a damn's busted." Well, I think when you get older, it's my "I don't give a damn" is
Mm.
busted, because then you start caring. One of the SEAL team magazines that they issue every quarter is called The Blast, and they interviewed old World War II and Vietnam veterans, World War I, World War II, and Vietnam veterans, because the suicide rate for them was much higher.
Mm.
And they asked them why they think that is. And then this was about 4 years ago. So at the age of 52, it really shined a light on my nervous system to me, because they said when you get older, the coping mechanisms that you had to keep your mind off of that start to fail.
Mm.
And the older you get, the more you feel, and the older you get, the more you reflect. So I'm glad you're here and have the ability to tell your story so that we can all process out loud together. Because processing internally isn't processing, it's suffering.
Yeah. My demons didn't come out until after I retired. And I mean, they came full force, nightmares and uh, dreams about people trying to kill me. Uh, one night I thought somebody was uh, at the foot of my bed and I kicked them. I actually kicked the dresser. Had a nice bruise the next day.
That's
But yeah,
funny.
and I realized it's because I had all that time on my hands,
Hmm.
you know, and uh, yeah.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And it's funny, I just actually, you kind of gave me some chills there again, because I was just reflecting back, is when did it really hit me? And it was probably, I'm going to say about 4 years ago now, when I went off of work for the first time for about 7 months, when I had to have a hip replacement done. So I didn't retire, but I went from, and people in this type of community, right?
Hmm.
You go from being surrounded by community and support and fellowship and purpose, and all of a sudden Friday at 3 o'clock, you have that last piece of cake, and they slap you on the ass, and you go home, and then you wake up Monday. Saturday and Sunday aren't bad, because you have every Saturday and Sunday,
Right.
but Monday morning brings despair, because I've lost my community, I lost everything, right? And it's just really intense and insane the way that happens. So thanks for sharing. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And just know that I'm always here to support, and that goes for you too, Sabine and Rich. I'm always here to support. So I think we took it pretty heavy and deep today, and I just want Sabine and Rich both to understand that the things that have haunted you and brought you despair can be the things that heal you and lift you up, if they're discussed enough and talked about enough and processed the right way. So with that, guys, I'm good. We're at 2:10. Unless anyone has anything really pressing they want to share, I'm okay with wrapping things up for the day. And I just want to say thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me or evening, depending where you're at.